Hey guys, my name's Tomatoanus, and on this day, 1 year ago, I got the first ever sub 40 Fallout 4 any percent speedrun, which still stands today as the current world record. I figured that since the run still hasn't been beaten, it would be fun to at least go back and look at the run and see where time can still be saved. An easy way to see how much time can still be saved is what's called the sum of best. When we use LiveSplit to time our speedruns, it also keeps track of whenever we achieve a new best time for one of our splits, and it stores it in the file. If you add up all your individual best split times, this comes out to your sum of best, which is theoretically the best possible time you could have gotten if you played every split as perfect as you possibly can as a runner. Now, there's really two different kinds of speed games when it comes to looking at your sum of best. The first kind of speed game is the kind where your sum of best very much represents a time you could actually get if you did a flawless run. A great example of this is Super Mario Odyssey. At the time of recording, the world record is just under an hour with 59 minutes and 58 seconds. At this time, Chaos Pringle's sum of best is 59 minutes and 37 seconds, which means that his hour-long world record is just 21 seconds off of what you could consider perfect play from him. Conversely, there are speed games where your sum of best doesn't really reflect a possible time for a human to get in a run. A great example for this is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. This game might look like a meme game to you and a meme speedrun, but it's actually an incredibly technical and deep speed game that has a huge community. At the time of recording, the current world record is held by Shift at 53 minutes and 25 seconds. If you look at his sum of best though, it's over 2.5 minutes faster than his actual world record. With this game, sum of best really just isn't a viable metric to determine how fast a human can actually perform a speedrun. Of these two kinds of speed games, Fallout 4 is very much the latter. My current sum of best for any percent is around 38 minutes and 30 seconds. And this minute and 15-second gap between my sum of best and the world record isn't because the run is unoptimized, it's because 39:45 is really close to the best possible time a human could actually get in the Fallout 4 speedrun. Now, as I just mentioned, my sum of best is around 38 minutes and 30 seconds, but there's no way in hell anyone's going to get a 38-minute and 30-second run with our current strats in Fallout 4. So I figured today we'd go back, actually look at the splits with a realistic lens, and determine how much time we can still actually save in Fallout 4. If you're familiar with Fallout 4 and the any percent speedrun, you'll know that it starts off in the pre-war segment where your main goal is to assign your special stats and to also enter the vault. There really isn't a whole lot to this split, and it's really easy to play it perfectly, and the majority of your time loss will just come from random pauses in the dialogue where your character says uh-huh or mm-hmm. My enter vault segment in my world record was pretty solid with a total time of 3 minutes and 42.01 seconds. If you're really good at this segment, it's not uncommon to get 3 minutes and 42 seconds, but if you're really good, you can get 3 minutes and 41 seconds. The best time I ever got in this segment was 3 minutes and 41.49 seconds, meaning we're around half a second off in my world record. Because of how short this split is, and also because of the fact it's the first split, so a top runner is going to reset a lot until they get a really good time, I'm more comfortable with assuming that we get really close to my best possible time on this split, so why don't we say that in this split we end up with a time of 3 minutes 41.75 seconds. This puts us about 0.26 seconds off of both my actual time and my best time I've ever gotten in this split. The next split in the speedrun is the entire Vault 111 segment. Now you can really divide up this split into two different sections, before you get frozen and after you exit the cryogenic stasis. The segment before you freeze, there's really no time loss to be had because you really just ride an elevator down, walk forward, and then grab a suit and talk to the doctor, which is something I did without any blemishes in my record. The second part of the Vault 111 segment is when most runners consider the run to actually begin, which is why we actually have an alternative any percent category called No Intro, where we begin the run right here. This part of the vault really has 3 major tricks that we do. 2 of them are cone clips and the other one is setting up a punch warp. If we watch the first cone clip from my record, you can tell that it's not necessarily the most clean clip that I could have done. Instead of going straight up and through over the wall, I kind of dropped down and had to reposition my cone, losing about 2 seconds on this clip that I could have normally saved. After the first clip, we access a terminal to open a door and then set up our punch warp, both of which went very smoothly, but that brings us to the second cone clip. This clip did not go well, to say the least. Clearly I struggled to actually clip up and over, and even once I clipped through the wall, then I struggled to actually enter the elevator area, losing me in total about 2 seconds again. Overall, this split was still really good. We had a final time of about 5 minutes and 19 seconds, which is only about 4 seconds off of my best time ever, which makes sense since I said I lost about 2 seconds to each of the clips. Now, it is a bit unreasonable to assume that both clips go perfectly in a run, since the clips are a bit inconsistent, especially the second one, so I think it's safe to say that instead of saving 4 seconds to pretty much tie or beat our best time ever, we would save about 2 to 3 seconds, but let's be conservative and just say 2 seconds. After we exit the vault, the next split is pretty straightforward. This split consists of triggering our cover slide to get to the Museum of Freedom, triggering our punch warp to get to Green Tech Genetics, and then getting the nuclear option quest by entering the Public Works maintenance area. Really, this split only has 2 places where you can lose time. The first is in the triggering of your cover slide. The reason for this is that when you trigger your cover slide, you want to try and stand in a very precise location to make sure that you get a consistent landing spot. Obviously, since you have to stand in a very precise location, runners will typically take their time to make sure it's lined up just right. You can see me do this in my record run, and realistically I could have gone a little faster and saved around half a second on this. Once we landed in Concord, we had to run up to the Museum of Freedom and trigger our punch warp, and this went pretty much as it was supposed to. It didn't really lose any time here, so we'll say that the world record is about as optimal as you could play this part. Similarly, the rest of the split is pretty spot on with what we need to do. There's really no way to mess up the Public Works maintenance area if you're familiar with the run. Now, an optimal time for the shopping segment in Fallout 4 is a bit counterintuitive. Naturally, you'd assume that you want a time really close to your best possible time for this split, but getting a really good time for a shopping split typically indicates that you had a bad segment. The reason for this is there are a lot of things that Daisy can sell in her shop that actually make our run go faster. And naturally, the more things you're buying, the longer it'll take to actually shop. But when you're buying all these things, you're saving a lot of time later on. So the shopping split, you're sacrificing a good amount of time save in order to save more time later. Looking at what we actually bought in this segment, there are only a couple things that we could have bought from her that she didn't have that saved time later on. The main one being a biometric scanner. We can account for the time that we would save by buying a biometric scanner here later on in the run when we actually lose time by not having one. But for now, because I spent a little extra time in her inventory looking for a biometric scanner, let's assume that we would break even here if she actually had one. Overall, my menuing for buying everything and binding it was pretty solid, not really any hesitation moments except for a couple things where I had to scroll up and down just briefly, so let's say we lose about half a second there compared to the optimal time, realistic in a run. And then also when I went to steal the Fat Man, a little bit of hesitation there, making sure I was properly lined up, so let's say another half second there for about a second time save in this split. The next split is the Museum of Freedom, which is the most combat intensive split in the run. There aren't any tricks in this split, it just relies on having good twitch aim and being able to kill everyone pretty quickly. I did waste about half a second here looting this container that had Jet in it while I already had Jet that I bought from Daisy, and then I also had some difficulty killing these guys in the second room where I should have just thrown a Molotov cocktail at them. These two time losses add up to about 3/4 of a second to a second, so let's again go 3/4 of a second time loss, just to play it conservatively. The next split is Prototype, which consists of cover sliding to Lexington, where you then go to Slocum Joe's basement and retrieve Carrington's prototype for the railroad. Our cover slide here was about as good as you could ask for, and then exiting our power armor went well. Sometimes you'll get locked in it for a couple seconds, but didn't happen here, so really no time loss upon entering Slocum Joe's basement. Once we're actually in Slocum Joe's basement, we have to clip out of bounds with a cake pan, and it didn't necessarily go too smoothly. We lost about a second here, so let's take that off of our potential time save. The next split is the railroad, which consists of running across downtown Boston to Old North Church, where you get to meet the railroad for the first time. Now, on the way there, there's a turret that you can kill in order to try and farm a biometric scanner if you don't have one. Because I didn't have a scanner, I went for this kill since it burns about a second and a half, but it'll save time overall if you get it. Unfortunately, I didn't get it, so I lost an unnecessary 1.5 seconds here that would have been saved if I had gotten a scanner at Daisy. One fun fact about this split is there is a discovered time save that saves about 2 seconds if you have an extra frag mine, but because of the way the game is currently routed, we don't have enough frag mines to actually do this trick in the run. Because of the fact that it's not really viable for the route, we won't count it against us right now. Once we're actually in Old North Church, our clip to the basement went pretty well, and then our dialogues with them went pretty smoothly as well. There were a couple things that could have gone a little faster, just little hesitations in the dialogue that are more or less up to luck, so let's say we could have saved about a second there. Overall, that brings our time save for this split to about 2.5 seconds, which isn't too bad. Our next split is what I refer to as Fenway, where we just run to Diamond City and trigger a cover slide to go to Nick's agency, where we then enter, exit, and then leave Diamond City. It's a really straightforward split. Nothing really happens outside of one cone clip, which went pretty smoothly in this run, so I think it's safe to say that this is about as realistically close to optimal as you can get. So we're going to say for this split, there's no reasonable amount of time to actually save here. The next split is the Glowing Sea, which is the long drawn out walking segment of the run. Typically for this split, the time that you end up getting is pretty constant. It's usually around 5:12 to 5:15, but because I didn't get the biometric scanner from Daisy, that means that I grabbed the backup scanner during this segment. Having to grab the backup scanner here loses you around 9 seconds that you would normally be able to easily save. Other than the biometric scanner, there really isn't any other realistic time save to account for in this split, other than maybe if you got a quantum, but those are pretty rare, so let's assume we didn't get any. The next split is killing Kellogg, which probably has the widest range of all the splits for possible times you can get. The reason for this is that this split contains probably the most inconsistent cover slide in the run. This cover slide is set up in the far southwest corner of the map when we're doing our Glowing Sea run, and then is triggered in the far northwest corner of the map, so we slide along the west edge of the map and hopefully stop at Fort Hagen, which is where Kellogg is located. While this strat is incredibly fast, it's incredibly inconsistent, and you can fly all the way across the map, and you'd have to run for minutes on minutes to be able to make it to Fort Hagen. Recently, there was a new strat discovered that skips the Kellogg slide, but it loses about 10 seconds, so if you're going to be going for world record, you're going to have to be doing the Kellogg slide. Having said that, the Kellogg slide that I got in this run was incredible. I landed right next to the scaffolding that we typically climb to get up to Fort Hagen to clip into the building. I could not have asked for a better Kellogg slide than this one. Despite how great this slide was, I did end up losing a second on my horizontal gun clip into the elevator area of Fort Hagen. During the run, I got a little excited with how good the slide was that I wasn't really paying attention to where I was walking, and I kind of just walked backwards and left of the door instead of walking directly back into it, so I had to reset myself, losing about a second. After that little mess up on the clip, the rest of the split went smoothly, and I was able to make it out of there in 1:25 seconds, just 5 seconds off of my gold time. The next split is talking with Nick Valentine in his DC agency after we kill Kellogg, and there really isn't anything to do wrong here other than missing a load warp, which I got first try in my run, so there isn't really any time to be saved in this split. Similarly, the next split is the Memory Den, which you've all heard me talk ad nauseum about, but this split doesn't really have any time save to be had because you just kind of walk in a straight line and there's nothing to really mess up as long as you don't fail your Amari dialogue skip, which we didn't in this run, so again, another split without any time save to be had. After the Memory Den, we have to go and talk to Virgil, who lives in the Glowing Sea. Unfortunately, during our run, Virgil's dialogue did lock up for around 8 seconds, which does happen from time to time. After we talked to Virgil, we headed over to Green Tech Genetics where we killed the courser with our Fat Man in order to get the courser chip, and there weren't really any mistakes there, so total time save for this split is around 8 seconds. The next split is a relatively short one. It mostly just consists of going to the Railroad HQ and having Tinker Tom decode the chip. This split did go pretty smoothly in my PB. There weren't really any mistakes or major time loss outside of maybe a second to some dialogues locking up. However, there was a new discovery within the past year that will save time in this split. This discovery is what we refer to as a dialogue slide. It behaves super similarly to a cover slide with a bit of a modification. All you have to do is aim your gun at Desdemona while she's finishing her dialogue here, and then the next time you aim down your sights, you get slingshotted back to where you were standing. This is used to circumvent having to run back up to Tinker Tom to make sure he's finishing his dialogue upon re-entering the HQ. The dialogue slide saves about 2 seconds, so accounting for that, as well as maybe saving a second from dialogue lockups, we save around 3 seconds in this split. The next split is the teleporter, which is a personal favorite of mine in the run. I just can't think of anything more satisfying than building this teleporter really fast. Rewatching this split now definitely is the most clean looking teleporter split I've ever had, and that makes sense because this is actually the fastest teleporter split I've ever had in my life. So I think it's safe to say that there really isn't any time to save in this split. Moving on to the last split, the Institute. This is definitely the split with the most potential for time save. In retrospect, that makes total sense because my hands were literally shaking when I was doing this split. And the nerves definitely show with how slow I am to set up the punch warp and then how I miss picking up the frag mine after. This right here alone is at least 3 seconds lost. In addition to just losing 3 seconds on that setup, there's actually a new setup for this punch warp that saves 3 seconds in itself. In the record, we teleport into the Institute, load up the relay tape to bring in Preston Garvey, and then we wait for him to teleport in. However, a new punch warp was discovered that allows for us to set up our punch warp while we're waiting for him to teleport in, meaning that we can multitask and not have to set it up after we've already talked to him. Overall, this saves around 3 seconds. There's also another decently sized time save right at the beginning of this split. If you're familiar with Fallout 4 speedrunning, you'll know that we do a trick now called jet jump. This consists of sitting down in this stool, standing up, which then clips us through a wall for some reason, popping jet, and then jumping, which will increase our height slightly since we're under the influence of jet, and make it so that we can travel just far enough to access this door to go to the reactor level. There is an alternative though that used to be part of the route way back in the day that's referred to as jetless, which is clipping out of bounds with a pistol higher up in the level and then dropping down and accessing the door. This strat was always thought to be a lot more inconsistent than jet jump, but another runner named Gingenia found a way to make it a lot more consistent, allowing for it to be done in runs. Overall, this saves around 6 to 7 seconds, so let's be conservative and say 6. Outside of that, my Institute split was pretty solid and there's not a whole lot of other time to save in it. With the Institute being the end of the run, we can now look at what our time would actually be with all these time saves. My original run that we're looking at is 39 minutes and 45 seconds long. The time that we've added up today comes out to around 41 seconds of time save, meaning that our run would actually be 39 minutes and 4 seconds long. Now let me just say, a 39:04 would be absolutely incredible, insane for someone to get in an actual run. I personally don't believe a human is going to get a time close to this unless new strats are discovered. The game is just so inconsistent, you would go insane grinding to get enough luck to get a 39:04 in an actual run. It's just that improbable that you have this kind of luck that all these things go right in one run, because things do happen like dialogue lockups that lose you time that are out of your control. I may sound like I'm contradicting myself because we did look at this run under a realistic lens. It's just so hard to do. I don't think anyone's going to get a time this good anytime soon. Do I think my record is unbeatable? No, there are mistakes in it. Anyone can beat it. Do I think 39:04 is really attainable for a human right now with current strats? No, it just seems too far-fetched to me, having all the experience in the game. I think you would go insane long beforehand and just get sick of the game. For those of you who are baseball fans, it's the equivalent of thinking anyone anytime soon is going to break Rickey Henderson's all-time steal record. With that being said, the Fallout speedrunning community really isn't a fan of the current Fallout 4 route. The route's just been really similar for a really long time and it's kind of stagnated and it's just kind of boring to us at this point, and a lot of things are really inconsistent that we'd like to get rid of. With that being said, there is a decent push right now for trying to make a new route work, mostly by another runner named Gingenia. There's been a fair amount of theory crafting in the past couple months about a potential reroute. We're actually incredibly close to this route becoming a reality. There are just a couple kinks in the route to iron out, but we're not really too sure on how to make them work right now without losing too much time and making the route unviable. But who knows, maybe in a couple days or weeks or maybe months we'll figure out this route or a different route and a 39:04 will become very much a possibility. Only time will tell how the Fallout 4 speedrunning route will really develop. I've been Tomatoanus and I hope you have an above average day.